Welcome to the Building Your Brand course, module number 2, Developing Your Brand Foundational Elements. I'm Luiza Campos. I'm the president of Marca Strategy, a brand building studio. I have over 30 years of experience helping organizations, big and small, build and strengthen their brands. In this course, I'll be walking you through the fundamentals of building a strong brand. The course has 3 modules in total and covers both strategic foundational elements as well as tactical pieces. As you progress through the course materials, I encourage you to work on the learnings of each module. You'll be able to start developing your brand's foundational elements as well as the tactical pieces that you can start putting in practice right away. As a reminder, this program is better suited for anyone within your organization who is responsible for overseeing the organization, so people like executive directors, board members, leadership team, and those whose responsibility is to oversee the marketing and communications of the organization. I encourage each organization to have 2 or more members engage in the program. Doing so will facilitate the development and implementation of the course materials. It will help with buy-in, internal buy-in, and will encourage discussions, which will really enhance the learning experience. So let's get started. This is the second module on the Building Your Brand course. In this module, you'll get into the specifics of how to develop your foundational brand elements, from your purpose or mission statement, your values, personality traits, which will define your culture. From there, we'll start to develop the foundational elements to start expressing your brand. These elements are your tone of voice and visual style. Let's get to it. Start with the why. If you haven't watched it yet, please look for Simon Sinek's The Start with the Why TED Talk. It's now an older video, but it has over 19 million views. Sinek sparked a movement with this talk. He urged leaders to dig deep into the purpose that drives the organizations. He introduces the Golden Circle, a simple yet powerful framework consisting of 3 layers: why, how, and what. These aren't just concentric circles on a diagram. They are an insight into human motivation and organizational success. The core idea is this: most companies know what they do, the products and services that they sell or offer. Some organizations know how they do what they do. This would be your unique selling proposition. But very few can clearly articulate why you do what you do, the reason that your organization exists, a reason that goes beyond profits. Let's be clear. As a for-profit, that's also always there. As a nonprofit, raising enough funds or raising the right amount of financial support is always there. But the reason behind the organization exists is what we're talking about here. Of course, for nonprofits, you all have a cause, you all part of a cause. But within those who serve under the same type of cause, so maybe it could be homelessness or ending poverty or domestic violence or mental health or whatever the case may be, you have to go beyond just that overall or overarching cause and really tap into the why of your own organization, of your own reason to exist within that general or overarching cause. According to Sinek, starting with why taps into our natural desire for inspiration, leading not only to better leadership, but also loyal customers, loyal donors who believe in your cause. So Is knowing your why important? In 1960, Professor Theodore Levitt wrote on his article in Harvard Business School. He was a professor at the Harvard Business School. And he wrote an article named Marketing Myopia. In that article, he coined the phrase that people don't want a 3/4 inch drill. What they really want is a 3/4 inch hole. What Levitt meant is that, and the central idea of his article was to shift the focus of businesses from the products or services that they sell or offer to the needs and wants of their customers. Levitt argued that many organizations suffer from what he calls marketing myopia, a short-sightedness that narrows their perspective to their existing products and services rather than understanding the broader need of their target market or the true value of their products and services. In a very similar way, Sinek is arguing just that. He's arguing that the why stands as the driving force behind every action that you take as an organization. And that consumers, they may purchase a what. At the end of the day, they may purchase a what, like the 3/4 inch drill. Or donors may donate towards a what, a specific program or a service. But why they do that is because of the why. It's because of the value that that specific service or that specific program or that specific product will create. Ultimately, identifying and communicating your why is critical, not only because it is the reason you exist, and therefore it should be clear to everyone within the organization to know what that reason is, but it is also the way you attract the right people, the right staff, and the right support, the right donors. You attract those that believe in your purpose and want to see you achieve it. In addition, it is also the reason your audience engages with you and the value that they attribute to you. So this may be your participants, your clients, or those you serve. So reflecting on your why and really being able to articulate your why, it elevates your work and the value, the impact, the difference you are making. It also helps you shift the focus from you, from that 3/4 inch drill that Professor Levitt was talking about, to the difference you make in those you serve. It shifts the focus from the tactical aspects of your organization, being the programs or services you offer, to the impact you have and the difference you make. I always like to say that the path to success is to matter. Nowadays, we all have choices. Consumers, donors, and we are all consumers and donors. And we all have lots of choices. So the way to attract the right audience is to connect based on our shared values, not just based on the tactical delivery of our services or programs. When we connect with others based on our purpose or our values, we connect over things that are important to us. And therefore, our connection have much higher significance. It matters. It elevates, connecting this way really elevates your organization and the work you do to a much deeper and more important level. It can be helpful sometimes to try to answer the question of what is your purpose? What is the purpose of your organization? To think about what is the true value you bring to your audience. So at the end of the day, with all your different programs or services or all your efforts, What is it that you're really trying to accomplish? What is that one thing? What is it all for? What is that one thing you hope to achieve? Let's look at some examples that may help illustrate this. Let's look at Dove. Dove is a huge company. It is part of the Unilever group, so it's massive. But Dove stands for much more than their products and services. If you are familiar with the brand, you know that they produce soaps, shampoos, but what they stand for, it's so much deeper and so much more meaningful than just those types of products. And they reflect that in all of their communications, in all of their marketing. They could be communicating about the benefits of their products and services, but doing so, they are putting themselves in a very similar, of course, stance as all other competitors in that same industry. What they're choosing to do here is communicate about what they are really trying to accomplish, which goes well beyond just making sure that you have clean skin and clean hair. They are really standing for a much deeper purpose. So Dove's why, or Dove's purpose statement, is we believe beauty should be a source of confidence and not anxiety. Their what, of course, is soaps, shampoos, skincare products. Their how is, they are in most retail stores. It is a massive global company, so they have a huge distribution system. But their why is to really help women everywhere develop that positive relationship with the way they look, helping raise their self-esteem and realize their full potential. So what they're really about is self-esteem and positive body image. So this is a really great example of how different the value of a brand can be, or the value that is attached to a brand can be, versus the products or services that they offer. Let's look at another very famous example, probably even more famous than Dove, which is Nike. We're all, of course, familiar with Nike as a brand. And I'm sure we have all seen many of their ads and how they communicate about themselves, about what they stand for. Nike's what is, of course, that they manufacture, they produce, and they distribute athletic clothing and equipment. Their how is, again, they're a massive company with global reach. They have very high profile endorsements and many sponsorships in different sports. Their why, however, their purpose statement, is to bring inspiration and innovation to every athlete in the world. And this is the only purpose statement that I know of that has an asterisk. And they go on to explain that if you have a body, you are an athlete. Meaning, we're not just catering, or we're not just trying to inspire elite athletes. It's really about everyone. So Nike is really about motivation or overcoming obstacles. Again, a huge difference and a much more elevated, more inspiring, more meaningful purpose statement than what they actually produce. An example from a nonprofit is Kiva. So Kiva does microloans for different people across the globe, mostly in underdeveloped countries. Kiva what is, again, they provide microloans to unbanked people around the world, and there's about 1 billion of people who don't have a credit card for emergencies or a debit card for easy access to their money, or credit history to help them get a loan. So they're an international nonprofit that provide that ability to different people around the globe to get microloans. They try to address that inequality. So they connect people through crowd-funded loans. So their how is that, again, they connect lenders with loaners, and they collaborate with lending partners to achieve this. But their why is not just about the finances, is that they believe that all people hold the power to improve their lives. So their purpose is really about empowerment, right? It's not just about connecting loaners to lenders. It's much bigger than that. And if you are familiar with Kiva and you see any of their communications, you will see this idea or this concept reinforced every single time. So going back to the golden circle, we can see now how communicating about your why is really elevating the work you do and the impact that you can have. It's easier for many organizations to talk about the what because this is what they do, what you do every day. It's easier to list your services and programs, but the why is really what moves people. The why is really what makes a difference in terms of engaging the right audience. So how do you define your why? How do we go about doing that the right way? There are 3 essential elements of a brand, and this is also, of course, the essential elements for any good purpose statement. It has to be authentic, so it has to be something that you're genuinely driving towards. It has to be aspirational, so it has to have that aspect that that vision, if you will, or that outcome that other people want to see and want to help you achieve it. And it has to be relevant. It has to connect, of course, with your audience. It's not going to be relevant maybe for all of everyone, but it is a way to filter also and attract the right people and the right support. So how you discover your why. And I use the word discover because your why will be in your stories. You will be in your origin story. So if there is the founding person for your organization, talk to that person, find out the reason why they decided to drop everything to dedicate their time and all of their effort towards this organization. It will be in the stories that you gather from those you've served, the value that they get, the difference that you've made in their lives. It will be in the stories of your volunteers. Why did they select to volunteer for your organization versus another one? It will be in the stories of your staff, of why they choose to work for this organization versus another one. So your why is really about listening and looking at all of these stories and looking for the reason, not how they engage with the organization, but why. Why are they doing that? What is that impact, that outcome? What is the value that your organization is providing, the difference that you're making that has moved all of these people or has changed their lives? Once you gather all those stories, you try to identify those themes. What is the pattern? What is the theme that you see repeated over and over in all of these stories? And it is very important to gather stories and from all your different audiences to make sure you have all the different perspectives. So from those who you serve, to internally staff, volunteers, to collaborators, potentially donors. So it's really important to gather all of these stories from all of the different audiences that you have, because everyone will have a slightly different perspective on their engagement with your organization. And by collecting all of these different stories, it's like putting the puzzle together of what is that why of your organization. So you identify these themes and patterns that you are seeing from these stories. And then you make sure that when you're doing that, you always have that focus on the impact, not on the specific tactics, not on the services that you provide or the programs that you provide, but on the impact, the difference you make. So keep reminding yourself that you're only trying to answer the question of why we exist. What is the main difference we're trying to make? You're not trying to answer the question of how we do what we do and what we do. That comes later, that is separate. In your purpose statement, you only need to answer, you should only answer the question of why. Why are we here? Why are we here? And if you do that, you will end up with a draft of your why statement, which you can refine and you can share with others internally or as well as externally to make sure that you refine and arrive to the right purpose statement, the right why statement. Just be aware that when you are sharing or receiving feedback on that, you must remind everyone that you are only answering the question of why, not of what to do, not of how you do it, but just why. And then you can test that why. Once you have that why statement, the purpose statement, then you can test it. You can, again, test it with others outside of your organization or even with people that you've gathered the stories from to see if you've captured the right essence of your organization's why. The stories are really, really key. So without the stories, without taking the time to interview people, listen to the language that they use, the words that they choose to use to express the difference that you've made in their lives or the reason why they engage with you. The stories are really important. We shouldn't assume, and taking the time to interview all of these different audiences, it is really worth your time. It will give you incredible insights, even though you may feel like you know those already. It's really important to make the interviews and really listen to the choice of words that people use. When you identify your themes, you're looking for those patterns. People may use different words to express it, but you will start to see that there are a lot of similarities, usually, a lot of cohesion in what they're saying. So you're trying to find what those patterns are, where those similarities keep being repeating. And the more interviews you make, the more clear this will become. If you are only interviewing a handful of people, you may not get enough to see those patterns. But as you interview more and more people, you will start to see those patterns emerge very clearly. So it's important to have audiences from all the different audiences that you serve, but also enough people from all of those groups. Focusing on your impact. So again, this is about the difference you make. So remember that when you are sitting down after you found those patterns or themes that have emerged from the interviews, from the stories that you've collected, and you're starting to write draft statements for your why, your purpose, it's so important because it's so difficult. We're so used to writing about what we do and how we do it. It's a lot harder to train ourselves to just focus on the results of your actions, not on the actual actions. So just on the results. So that's how you really need to keep reinforcing yourself or keep testing any draft statements against that. Does this answer the answer of why we are here, why we exist? Then defining your why statement. Again, it's not about you. It's not about what you do. It's not about your organization. And a lot of organizations hesitate to not put the name of the organization in their purpose statement. That is not a place where you need to put that, because your purpose statement will be sitting on your website, on your annual report or your impact reports or your donor reports, or they will be on your brochures, or they will be presented in a presentation that someone, some representative of the organization is giving. So it will be coming from you. Again, the statement must only be on why do you exist? Why are you here? Then testing that why. Does it reflect your reason to exist? Does it reflect the value you want to create for your audience? Does it resonate with those who you've gathered stories from when you talk to them about it? So once you have your why statement complete, then we need to start defining your values and your personality traits and culture. Once you have your why statement, which is the reason you exist, then everything you say and do must be consistent with that why, with that statement. So all actions that you take, all the decisions that you make, all the behaviors that you show, they must be in alignment with your why or purpose statement. And what is really critical is once that purpose statement, once that why is defined, staff internally must really understand it, because brands, they grow from the inside out. So it has to start from within. If your staff is not clear on what your purpose is, you cannot hope that anyone outside of the organization will have clarity on that, because that statement needs to be reinforced and demonstrated and expressed through everything that your organization does, through everyone that represents your organization. So it's really, really key to make sure that internally those closer to the organization have a very clear and good grasp on what that purpose is. Then we need to define your values. Now, values are a set of principles that you live by. So these are things you believe in, you stand for, and you will not compromise on. Your values guide all your decisions on how you behave, how you interact with others, and the choices you make as an organization. Your values are really key because it's not just any set of values. You need to define what are the right set of values that are going to keep you on the path towards your purpose. So it's not just any core value. There are many really important core values out there, but it's what are the right core values that are going to keep us going towards our purpose. They're not going to let us deviate away from our purpose. So in essence, you're creating or you're defining your moral code, right? You're defining how you're going to behave, interact, and make decisions together that will always take you towards your purpose. Look at the stories again. So the same stories you did to define your purpose statement. Look at those stories again. What are some of the word choices that people use to describe how they feel when they interact with you, to describe how they view the important things that you stand for, or that you have shown that you are always trying to do. Once you have those, and you may have some cohesiveness in terms of the values that come out of those stories, and you can ask people when you are doing those interviews, you can specifically ask them not just why, what they think the purpose of the organization is, but also ask them, what do they think the core values of the organization is? How do they feel when they interact with the organization? What are the things that they think the organization stands for that really matters to them, that aligns with your own, that align with your own values? And you start seeing or identifying those themes. You can list all of the values that came out of those stories or those interviews, and I'm sure you'll find some cohesiveness or some values that they may have different words to express them, but may be very similar. And then you narrow that list down because you will identify certain things, and you may end up with a few values that represent always more than just one thing, but you will end up with a more narrow list of the core values. Now, I always tell my clients that it's really important that you select the right set of values, because whatever value you select, you have to commit to it. And it's a lot easier to express your values or to live by your values when everything is going well. But it can be a lot harder to live by your values when things are not going well. So whatever values you have identified from the stories, and whatever list that you've narrowed these values down to, you need to make sure that you select values that you can commit to no matter what. Because the worst thing you can do is have a set of values for the organization and not be consistent, not be able to live by those values. That will create a lot of lack of trust in the organization and lack of confidence in the organization. So you need to be very careful selecting the right set of values that you feel comfortable that you can commit to. So yeah, look at the stories to identify those core values. Those core values are there. And as I said, you can directly ask people, what do you think are the core values of the organization? How do you feel when you engage with us? Based on what you know about the organization, what do you think are things that are really important, things that the organization stand for? You can put you can literally list all of the values that came out of the list. And sometimes I use post-it notes because it's easier to then just grab one word and attach it to another one to create those themes, identify those themes or those groupings. So if that's easier for you, you can put all the values that come out of the stories in one on a single post-it note, so all of them have just one post-it note, and you can rearrange them and start seeing the themes that come out of that. When you are brainstorming your core values, make sure that you keep in mind what are the right values, the right set of values that we need to achieve our purpose. Because as I said, there's many different ones, but what are the right ones that are going to keep us on the right path towards our purpose? What values are we already demonstrating? And those will come out on the stories. So a lot of these values are things that you're already living by, you're already demonstrating them. So what are those? And what are attitudes and behaviors that we admire, that we may not quite have it potentially, or we may have it, but may not be as consistent as we like. So what are those that maybe things that we want to embody, that we admire, that we think are really important to achieve our purpose, that may not have been mentioned in the stories, or it may have been, but not as strongly as other values, or they may be present, but not as I said, not as consistent as you would like. And think about the decisions that you've been making as an organization up to this point. What are the principles that have guided you in your decision making? Because you may already, as I said, be applying a lot of these values, but perhaps you have not named them or have not identified that. So when you think back at some of the decisions, particularly the hard decisions that you have made in the past, what have guided that decision making? What was really important for you when making the set of decisions you made as an organization? Because there are values there for sure. What do you stand for in the industry that you are in, or the community that you are in? So again, those are questions that can help you identify the right set of values. So for the cause that you are in, for instance, there may be a set of values that are really important or unique for that overall cause. You may have unique ones to your own organization, so not all nonprofits that are part of the same cause, and I gave some examples as homelessness or ending poverty or mental health or education or health. There are many different nonprofits for each one of those areas, and they may have some values that that are in alignment, or they're present in all of these organizations, but they may also have some very unique values that are unique to the organization and to what is really important to that particular organization. So think about that. When you narrow down the list, make sure that you keep in mind that alignment with your purpose. Does this specific value support and drive our purpose or our mission? Uniqueness. Does this value differentiate us from other organizations? Some may, as I mentioned, because it may just be very unique to your own style or your own way to addressing that cause or that issue. But others may not, and that's okay. So uniqueness here is not always, you're not looking to be different. It's okay to have some uniqueness, and it's also okay to have values that are shared by other organizations. The most important thing is authenticity. Do we genuinely believe in and act on this value? As I said, some values you may be very much already there. Some other values may not be quite there, or may not be as consistent as you want, or maybe they're not there at all, but you realize, or you have discovered that some of those values are really important that they're there, are really important that they're named. We shouldn't assume that we are going to always live by this value. Maybe it's something that you really want to articulate, that you really want to name. So again, everyone internally is very clear that that is a value that you must always adhere to. Reflecting and committing. I said this before, and this is a really critical aspect. So when you do have your final set of values, and by the way, I recommend not having many more than 4 or 6. More than that, it just becomes confusing and a very long list of values. And each word or each value can represent a lot of things. We'll get that in a moment. But just having between 4 to 6, 4 ideally, I think is the best, because it is easier to remember, and it's a lot easier also to be able to commit to those values. Now that we have set our set of values, now that we have defined our set of values, we move into defining our personality traits or our culture. So personality traits are a set of human characteristics that guide your tone of voice, language, look and feel, and every way that you behave or interact. It is translating your values into actions. So personality traits are how you demonstrate your values through your three things: your behaviors, your interactions, and the decisions you make. There's 4 steps to define your personality traits. The first is to review your values, and this is important obviously because the personality traits are how each of these values are translated by our own organization, how it shows up in our own organization. You brainstorm personality traits that align with each one of those values. You start grouping or identifying themes that start to come up as you're brainstorming and aligning each one of these values. And you then create the personality trait statements. So let's review each one of these. When you review your finalized list of core values, you need to then discuss how these values will help the organization stay focused on its purpose. And reviewing these values, we need to remind staff, you need to remind leadership that can we live by these values in difficult situations? Everyone in the organization needs to adhere to these values and live by these values, and that is particularly the case of the leadership team. The leadership team really needs to embody these values, really needs to lead by example. Otherwise, the values become, and how we live by these values or demonstrate these values become more gray, become a little less tangible or clear. So it's really important that we have a very clear definition on what these values mean, what are our values, what do they mean, and how do we bring them into actions, how do we translate them into actions, behaviors, and decisions, how we demonstrate our values in the good times, and particularly so in the difficult times or situations. Now we go to the second stage of brainstorming of personality traits that align with each value. I highly recommend involving staff in this process. And you, depending on the size of your organization, you can engage all staff together, or you can do it by division or area. But it's important to involve staff because, again, your brand grows from the inside out, and it's really important to have staff not only buy into the values, but really understand what each one of these values mean and how they, within their own roles, existing roles and responsibility, what is it that they need to do differently from what they're already doing, or more of, or less of, or what are they doing that really connect with each of the values? What are they doing or can do that is a demonstration of those values? So it really helps staff gain that clarity and alignment, so you can see consistently these values being demonstrated in many different ways, depending on the role of each staff member. But all the time, these values are then being lived because staff understand how they connect. And also, doing this exercise with staff, it really helps them regain a real focus on the purpose that they have, and how important they are, and how they can contribute towards the pursuit of the purpose of the organization. So it really elevates their work and connects their work with the purpose of the organization. So when you are brainstorming the personality traits that align with each value with staff, you're asking them, what does this value mean to you? how can your work or within the work that you do, how can you demonstrate this value? What does that actually look like? What does that feel like for you and others that you're engaging with or interacting with? What are some of the decisions, what do you need to keep in mind when you make a decision to make sure that you're aligning with this value? So ask them, what personality traits would best represent this value in our organization? How would we want to be perceived by others in line with this value? So for example, with the value of integrity, how does this value, how does integrity, what does that look like inside our organization? How do we demonstrate this value internally and externally? So some personality traits that might be part of the value of integrity could be honesty, transparency, and trustworthiness, for example. Here's an example of what the value of respect can look like, and we start developing the personality traits this way. So first, we see a very simple one phrase of what this value means to us, to the organization. So respect for this organization means treating others the way we would like to be treated. That's a first step. How do we demonstrate this value? Well, we demonstrate this value by treating each other and others with kindness, empathy, and compassion. We practice active listening. In other words, we are really trying to listen, to understand the other person rather than thinking about our own agenda or our own opinions that we're trying to push. We respect our clients' autonomy and decisions. We suspend judgment, our own beliefs and opinions. We are open and we embrace different perspectives. And we see our clients as a whole person. How does it feel? So when we are acting upon this value, when we are demonstrating this value, how does it feel? Well, for our clients, they feel respected, they feel heard, seen, and understood. They feel empowered. For our team, when we treat each other and interact with each other with respect, everyone feels valued and supported. So as with the example we just saw with the value of respect, you do that for each of the values that you have defined as being the core values for the organization. And it's that first step through this brainstorming that you start to see some patterns or some themes becoming apparent, right? Then you start grouping very similarly to what you did to define your set of values. You try to look for those themes and those patterns, and you group similar or related traits together. So for example, you may have found the traits of friendly or approachable, and they could be combined. So look for themes or patterns that have risen from the brainstorming exercise. After grouping, you can prioritize 2 to 3 traits for each core value by considering, which traits most accurately represent how we want to embody this value. Which trait feels more like us or is more important to us. Which trait aligns best with our overall brand and culture. So how are we as a group? What are the sets of behaviors that we really want to nourish, that really align best with who we are as a group and as an organization, or who we want to be, right? So because sometimes cultures are not as healthy or have not arrived yet to where we want it to be. So always keep that in mind. Maybe you have already an incredibly healthy and positive culture, and that's fantastic, and you want to safeguard that culture, and you want to really then be able to understand, well, what are the traits of our culture that makes us so special, because we really want to identify them, name them, and protect them, and really always try to nourish them. But some organizations may say, our culture is not where it used to be, or our culture used to be better, but now it's not so much. So we're trying to understand that. And so this exercise of defining the personality traits can be really helpful for that. It's really helpful to connect with how we want to demonstrate these values in a way that is authentic to us, that really nourishes and expresses who we are, our culture as an organization. And now that you have traits for each core value, you look at the big picture. So you ask the team, if we combine all of these traits, what is the overarching personality that would emerge? Are we energetic? Are we compassionate? Are we understanding organization? What are some of these personality traits that really emerge that feels very much like us? How would you describe our organization's overall personality in 3 to 5 words? For example, your personality could be described as approachable or innovative or creative or reliable. So what are some of these words and themes that have come up through this exercise, through the brainstorm exercise, that we can identify and really select because they feel very, very much like us, very authentic and genuine? Once you've identified those core personality traits, then you can summarize these traits by crafting very brief personality trait statements that really encapsulate, how your organization embodies its values through its personality. Different organizations do it in different ways. I've seen some of our clients, or we help some of our clients define their personality traits for each one of them. Others have 2 to 3 statements that really encompass different traits, but it's a short, easy way for people to keep those in as top of mind. So you use these statements or these summaries to guide the internal culture and external brand efforts. So everything is guided and everything is aligned. And of course, starting with the purpose, defining the values, and then how we express these values in terms of our own personality, in our own unique way inside the organization, that people can feel on the outside as well. People can experience and witness on the outside as well. So for example, we can say something as, our organization is committed to being an approachable, transparent, and innovative. We demonstrate these traits by fostering open communication, delivering honest feedback, and constantly seeking new solutions for our clients and team members. That can be one way of expressing or explaining our personality trait. This is another example. So instead of having that longer paragraph, one of our clients had 2 phrases. We are caring team players and community builders. And we are ambitious problem solvers and innovative thinkers. And then they provide more explanation, more context to each one of these phrases. But they decided to have just 2 phrases to be easier to remember. Caring team players, community builders, ambitious problem solvers, and innovative thinkers. This is another example. This is from PayPal. So PayPal has, as part of their brand book, which is a brand book is where all of the information about your brand, including your purpose, your values, your personality traits, your tone of voice, and your logo guidelines, it's all there. It's like the Bible of your brand. If you don't have one, I highly recommend you create one. But this is what PayPal has in their brand book about their brand personality. So our brand, as they say, our brand personality defines who we are. And we are helpful, human, innovative, vigilant, and courageous. And they go on explaining each one of these and how does that look like for PayPal. This is another example. This is from Slack, the online work groups. Many people have potentially used Slack or have used Slack. So they define their personality as we're creative, professional, thoughtful, respectful, purposeful, and curious. And they go on in explaining what does that actually look like for their organization. Now that we have our purpose statement, our set of values, and we have described our set of values in terms of our personality traits, we then need to make sure that our tone of voice and our visual style is in alignment with our personality traits, which of course are in alignment with our values and which of course are in alignment with our purpose. So you can see how the purpose starts to cascade down all the way to the language we use, to how we look and feel, to any piece of content or information or any experience that we put out there into the world. And this is how you start telling your story. This is how you start forming the right set of descriptors, the right set of experiences and expressions that people then start to form the right perception or the ideal perception that you want them to have about your organization. To develop your tone of voice, again, there's a few steps that you need to take. Always, as you may see now by all these exercises, go back and review your purpose, your values, and personality traits. You're always trying to align with your purpose, with your values, with your personality traits. So review those once again. Review your audience. Who are you talking to? Who are you engaging with? And every organization has a variety of different audiences. So it's important to keep all of those audiences in mind, including your internal audiences. Remember, it starts from the inside out. So don't ever forget your internal audience. Brainstorm tone voice descriptors. So much like your personality traits, what are some of the descriptions that we can come up, what are some of the descriptions for our tone of voice that will align with our personality traits and make sense? If we have this type of personality, what would be the right tone of voice for us? And then develop tone of voice guidelines. This is really critical. So don't assume that people will know how to write on behalf of the organization. Even if you have internally really capable people that have been doing this for some time, it's really important to develop these voice guidelines because we want to align every single piece of communication that we put out there, from your website to your reports, to job descriptions, to funder reports, to brochures, to social media posts. So it all needs to feel, no matter who sees it and what platform they see it from, it all needs to align and be consistent with the right tone of voice. And then you develop the visual style, much similarly to your voice guidelines or your tone of voice guidelines. You need the same with a visual style. So from your color palettes to your design elements to your photographic style to your icon or the icons you utilize, what are the right set of visuals that we want to use that are in alignment with our purpose, with our values, and with who we are, our own personality. So let's go a little deeper in each one of these. The first step, review your purpose, values, and personality traits. Again, always start with that. Don't assume that people will have that top of mind, and it just sets the right tone for the whole process. Ensure everyone understands these guiding principles, right? Write them on the whiteboard, or you can even distribute copies. So if you're working with a team and with a group, it can be your marketing team, your leadership team, or it can be a bigger team of staff. Always have those there. And start discussing, what are the right, how are we going to show up with this, with our purpose, our values, and our personality traits? What are some things that really stand out to us? Next, to focus on your audience. So who are we speaking to? And as I mentioned, every organization has a variety of different audiences, yeah, including internally. So one thing that I find really helpful is to create what we call personas. So these are different personas for each of your audiences. And these personas, they are fictional characters, of course, but that are based on someone or a group of people or that audience group that you're trying to reach. And it's just really helpful for whenever you're trying to write something for a particular audience to have that persona in front of you. So you can remind yourself of things like what are some of the demographics and psychographics of this audience. So you literally I recommend adding an actual image, a picture. It could be a stock image, but it's someone who represents an image that represents that audience. You can give it a name. You can give a name to that person that persona who's representing your audience group. And then you start creating some more specifics. Well, what is the age, for instance? And it could be a variety of ages, but what is this age group? Where they come from? Where are some of the interests that they have or the needs that they have? What are some of the drivers? Why would they want to engage with your organization? Or what could possibly be some of the ways that are creating some hesitation for them to engage? So you're really trying to understand that audience as best as you can. Some audiences may be easier to understand because you may have some examples of engagement that you can tap into. So your clients, for instance, or those who you serve, you may have a lot of experience with those. Donors as well. So those can be a little easier. But you're trying to understand them as much as possible and put it down in words, in an actual persona. So it doesn't matter who is then writing on behalf of the organization. It could be someone internally, a new staff member, or it can be someone externally that you hire a contract. They have that in mind as to help guide the content and to help them really put themselves in the shoes of this audience group when they are trying to write on their behalf. So really put down on those personas. It could be just a one-pager, so something simple, but you try to define or put down some of the characteristics of this group. What are their needs? What are their challenges, their desires? What language resonates with them, or actual words resonate with them? And this can even be different even amongst your client group. Maybe there's some differences there depending on your organization. Maybe there's some differences between, we serve newcomers, for instance, and or we serve younger audiences as well as older audiences, or females and males, or those who identify with different religious groups or different backgrounds. And so just as much detail as you can put, as much as you can try to understand about your audience, the better you can communicate with them. If your audience is professional and formal, your tone of voice might be more polished and authoritative, because then you try to connect these audience groups with your tone of voice that reflects your personality. And one thing that I always tell my clients is your core of who you are and your personality, that always remains the same. So think of yourself that way. Your core values, your personality, it's always pretty much the same. It's sort of that essence of who you are, that core of who you are is always there, always present, no matter what situation you're in. But it has some elasticity to it. So you probably behave or you probably talk differently if you're talking to a 5-year-old, if it's your kid or your grandkid or your nephew, than if you are going out with some friends, for instance, friends that you've known for a long time, or celebrating at a bar or something, or if you are at church, or if you are at a more formal event or at a boardroom presentation. So in different situations, we adapt ourselves how we speak or how we show up, but who we are on our core, we're always the same. Our values don't change. Our personality doesn't change, but we might differ a little bit depending on the actual event or the actual situation we are in. And we do this so we can be more relatable and we can be more compelling in each one of those situations. You wouldn't talk to a 5-year-old the same way you talk at a board presentation, for instance, simply because, and vice versa, right? Simply because you want the communication to be as effective as possible and to resonate with the audience that you are with. So the same applies for brands, right? So keeping your audience in mind is really important, as well as making sure that while you're resonating with each of these audiences, you're also remaining true to who you are, and you're always being consistent in how you demonstrate and reflect who you are. So once you've reviewed and create the personas for each audience that you serve, you then start mapping the right tone of voice. And I use the word mapping because I actually find it very helpful to start drawing a flip chart or a whiteboard or a piece of paper. You start charting what are the right spectrums, right? Or what are the, because as I said, there's a bit of flexibility, but what are some of the characteristics? And sometimes it's helpful to write down with opposing characteristics. So for example, you can say, are we formal or are we casual? And within that range, where do we fall? So it's not always, oh, we are super formal, it could be, or are we completely casual? Most of the time, organizations are somewhere in between. But it's helpful to put yourself in that scale. So where are we? Are we more towards the casual? Are we more towards the formal? Friendly and professionals can be the same thing. Playful versus serious, or empathetic versus direct. So you start to see how it's not that you have to choose one 100% versus the other, but it's like, well, depending on where we are, and you can actually then put these mappings under each of the personas. So if we are for a boardroom or for a funders presentation, we may lean more a little bit towards formal than casual. But if we are at an event, for instance, or a fundraising event, or if we are at a team building exercise, maybe we lean a little bit more towards the casual. So in each persona that you create, you start putting these, and you can select which opposing characteristics you want to have and where you fall, so people know how to show up with the right tone of voice, or how to write on behalf of the organization with the right tone of voice for the organization as well as for that particular audience group. Now that you have your tone descriptors, then you start to expand on each one and how it should be applied in practice. So you create those guidelines that I've been talking about that are really important for every brand to make sure that there's consistency throughout. So you compile, your tone of voice guide and share some examples. So you start really exemplifying or creating descriptors or examples of how this tone of voice presents itself. So for instance, if you are warm and friendly, if you are that tone of voice is the right tone of voice to align with your personality traits and your values. An example here is, this is how it shows up. This is how we would write. We're excited to help you with your project. Let us know how we can assist. You don't do something like this. Please submit a support ticket. And you can see how the please submit a support ticket is a much more colder, direct tone of voice than the first one, right? The first one is much more warm and friendly. So you start providing examples, and you can provide a series of different examples of how warm and friendly shows up, and even in different platforms. So it could be in emails or on social media posts, or on letters, whatever the case is, you provide different examples so people can really start to grasp what it means to write with that tone of voice. And the fifth step on this process is to develop your visual style. Now, much of what I have shared with you today and the processes to develop these elements of your brand, you can try to do that internally as much as you can. If you can, I highly recommend you engaging a professional that can help you through the entire process of finding and developing your brand from your purpose, values, personality trait, and so on. If you can't, and this is the purpose of this course, is to help organizations to develop that internally. Now, having said that, when it comes to visual elements, I highly recommend you engage in a professional for this, because it makes a huge difference. And if you don't have internally the skills or experience to develop you will not be able to achieve the right visual expression for your brand. And it is just like the tone of voice, but the visual expression is really important. Some people will have a first impression just based on looking at a piece, a report or a postcard or a brochure. They will have an automatic response and an image and perception of your organization, even without reading anything that it's on it, just by a quick second look at it. If you think about it, a lot of billboards, for instance, about 1 to 2 seconds that people spend looking at it. So they may not even be able to read, but the look and feel, the colors, the design elements, that will make an impact. Even on websites, the average people stay on a website between 1 and 3 seconds. So you have to really be that visual element in how the website is created is really, really important to captivate people and have them stay longer, the right audience. So I highly recommend you engaging a professional for this phase. And they can then really work with you in terms of developing the right visual style that will reflect your brand purpose and personality. And some of these elements will be, of course, your logo. You may have an existing logo, but based on the brand work that you've done, I highly recommend relooking at this logo, reevaluating if it is the right one. Maybe it is, but maybe you need different colors or a slight polish of the logo. Or maybe the logo is not the right visual element for you right now and you may need to change. But also things like the typography that you use, as well as photography and illustrations. So revisit the key brand elements once again, the mission or purpose, values, your audience, your personality traits, your tone of voice. And this is where you define how your visual identity should reflect all of these, right? So what should our visuals say about us? How do we reflect our personality and our values? How do we want our audience to feel when they see our materials? So you start to explore different styles, and this is how a professional can really help you with that. And when you're exploring these different styles, you evaluate how well each of these styles reflect your brand, your personality. So for instance, in photography, should we use candid photos or that are more authentic, more real, versus more posed or rehearsed type of images, right? So that's just an example. And our visual style, should it be more clean and minimalistic, or should it be more complex or more layered or more textured? So what is the right style? Should it be more vibrant or colorful, or should we be more subdued? more minimalistic? Should we be more warm and inviting, or bolder, and stronger, or having more high contrast and dramatic, for instance? So those are all the questions that we want to ask ourselves, that we want to evaluate, and having a professional guide you through it can be incredibly helpful. So I'm going to show you now an example that sort of encapsulates all of these areas, demonstrates all of the process that we've been talking about. This is a client of ours, the Business Council of Alberta. It is a non-for-profit, and their purpose is making life better. And you can see, even with this visual, even with the way the purpose is written on a handwriting type of font, there's meaning behind that. It was very intentional in using this, and very intentional in even showing this image that has kids in it. It's a business council, so they deal with business. They are a membership organization of the largest businesses in Alberta, but yet there's an image here talking or depicting children, because this aligns with their value, with their purpose of making life better. So it's not just about businesses, it's how businesses can work to create a better community for all. They go on into explaining what each one of these values means to them as an organization. How do they show up? How are they interpreted? What is all the meaning that they have? And then they start describing their personality traits. So we're driven by purpose, united by outcome, and we are daring and achieving. And they explain what that means. They could have said purpose focused. They were driven by purpose. This is what really trying to encapsulate that drive, that thirst that they have to pursue their purpose, to really try to make life better for all Albertans. United by outcome, they are focused on those results. Every action that they take, every effort is to really try to achieve the best results possible in the pursuit of their purpose. So you can start seeing how they start to translate those values into the personality traits and into actions. And they give here even more explanation for each one of those. And then they start developing their tone of voice. Our tone of voice, as they say here, is how we live into our brand's personality and values. So it has to be consistent. It has to always demonstrate who they are as an organization. The characteristics of their personality traits is human, or their tone of voice, human, empowering, balanced, and active. And then they start describing, what does that mean? What is having a human tone of voice means? Well, it means we use correct technical terms when necessary, but we don't speak or write so only a select few can understand, right? We are much more inclusive. We try to be much more inclusive. We talk about people, not abstract concepts. So always trying to connect what they're writing and what they're doing with their purpose, with making life better for everyone, not just for businesses, right? So you can start to see here how that tone of voice looks like into action, right? We are compassionate, we are passionate and clear. They do that for each one of the tone of voices that they select. Then they have some guardrails. So for each of those tone of voice, so for the human guardrails, they have some questions to help guide the right tone of voice when we're writing. So is there an opportunity to inject some humanity, passion or compassion in this content? Can I use any real life stories or examples, how this impacts people to make this more relatable, right? To connect it back to individuals. Does it read like we care about our interests or that our interests or that of Albertans, right? Does it connect? Is it showing that true and genuine care? Is the sentence clear? Can we simplify it any further? So these are guardrails or questions that are really helpful when someone is writing or editing a document to go back to and think about these questions as they are doing this. Then they show some do's and don'ts. So they have actual examples. So people before province when possible. So we want to make life better for Alberta. That's a don't, because that we're not talking about people. We're just talking about the region itself. And so do's is from teachers to surveyors. We want to make life better for Albertans. So that's a simple change, but you can see how these copy style samples, these actual examples, can be very helpful for someone, again, as they're writing or editing any document on behalf of the Business Council of Alberta. Then they have the brand guidelines. This is, by the way, an example of a few pages of their brand book. I've talked about the brand book before. So you always have your logo guidelines. These are simple guidelines in terms of how you use your logo. So examples of what not to do versus what to do. You have, of course, your color palette, and you have the photo, video, and illustration guidance, as well as examples, which is always very, very helpful to have. So I hope you found this module helpful. There was a lot of content, and if you can, I recommend you going back and listening to it again, because there was a lot of content that came through this. There's a lot of steps for this process, but I hope you found it helpful. And I hope to see you in our third module, which is our next module and the last one on this course, Bringing Your Brand, Building Your Brand. And the next module is Bringing Your Brand to Life. So is how, we've been talking about how to describe and how to express our brand through our tone of voice and our visual style. And in module 3, we're going to be talking about how do we apply the brand internally. So how can we make sure that even though we have those sets of values, and we created that exercise with staff on what these values mean and how they show up, how can we make sure that they are operationalized and they are top of mind? They are something that is fully present every time we engage with each other, we interact with each other, we behave and make decisions together. And how we can make sure that we're doing the same externally, that they show up externally as well. So tune in for our third and last module on bringing your brand to life. I hope to see you there, and thank you so much for listening.